Hello and welcome to Real Obscure. My name is Kevin H. Shaw, and in tonight's episode, we're off to a world of fantasy adventure, featuring swords and sorcery, magic and monsters, and blades and boobs. From 1987, it's the rip-roaring fantasy romp, Deathstalker II. Deathstalker II was produced by Roger Corman, the veteran powerhouse of B-movies and low-budget productions. The movie was shot in Argentina as part of a 10-movie deal he made with the distributors Ares Cinematográfica Argentina. The majority of these movies were fantasy adventures, including the first Deathstalker, The Warrior and the Sorceress, Wizards of the Lost Kingdom, Barbarian Queen, Amazons, Deathstalker II, and Stormquest. And I'm sure at some point we'll be coming back to some of them, but tonight's movie is certainly the best of the crop, for reasons we'll get into later. The movie was directed by Jim Wynorski, who we met in Real Obscure's episode on his movie Chopping Mall. And Deathstalker 2 does share a lot of the same DNA with the Robo Rampage classic, including appearances from a couple of faces you'll recognise. Wynorski, for those of you who haven't heard the episode on Chopping Mall, is a writer, producer, director who was discovered by Corman and produced a number of movies for Corman's distribution company, including the aforementioned Chopping Mall, Tonight's Feature, Transylvania Twist, and The Haunting of Morella. He's still making movies to this day, writing and directing a mix of family-friendly movies and adult parodies. The original Deathstalker, which, if you're worried about having not seen, don't, as it's really not related to this movie in any way, came about when Corman, disappointed he didn't get to adapt Conan the Barbarian for the big screen, decided he'd just do his own version. Although a moderate success, the sequel saw the lead recast and, well, as we'll see, the new casting also brought a new tone for the movie. Corman offered the director's seat to Wynorski as he'd been impressed with his work on Chopping Mall. As he was approaching the end of his 10-movie deal, he decided he wanted the last production to be a second Deathstalker movie, and so approached Wynorski with the project. As he was approaching the end of his 10-movie deal, he decided he wanted the last production to be the second Deathstalker movie, and so approached Wynorski with the project. So, what's it all about? The movie opens with our hero, Deathstalker, in fine roguish fashion, sneaking into a vault to steal a valuable gemstone. Discovered, he is forced to fight his way out, engaging in some actually quite impressive swordplay and stunt work, before leaping from a window and making good his escape. As he rides away, we see a warrior woman, who we'll meet up with later, angrily watch him leave. She vows, "I'll have my revenge, and Deathstalker too," which she says right into camera as the title card appears. This sequence immediately sets the tone for what's to come, because unlike so many other movies that were, shall we say, inspired by Conan the Barbarian, this one plays the entire thing with its tongue firmly in its cheek. Not only do we get a Peter Griffin-pleasing character says the name of the movie moment, but this jewel thievery is accompanied by the same musical sting we heard in the similar gemstone heist sequence in Wynorski's previous movie, Chopping Mall. Get ready for a lot of referential meta-comedy like this. Deathstalker is played by John Terlesky. Terlesky appeared, far too briefly, in Wynorski's Chopping Mall, as well as the 1988 Agatha Christie adaptation Appointment with Death and 1990s comedy Crazy People. He's since moved into directing for television, working on such shows as The Blacklist, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Criminal Minds. Now, I honestly don't know why Terlesky wasn't a bigger name, because he is fantastic in this movie. He has all the charisma and knowingness of an actor like Bruce Campbell, and his portrayal of Deathstalker is fantastic. he is literally a walking wink to camera. His comedy chops are great, his fight and stunt sequences, which he did himself, are fantastic, and he is cast perfectly as the cocky, self-assured, and extremely self-aware rogue. After a fantastic title sequence of flames accompanied by a suitably rousing adventurer's theme, we cut to Abbott's for Food, a tavern that's open 24 hours a day and is a very obvious acronym. But get used to that, as the movie plays for a modern audience and makes many historically inaccurate references. But that's part of the fun. Now, Wynorski said the movie's original script was awful, and so shortly after arriving in Argentina, he began to rewrite it. Given that the first Deathstalker is very much a straight Conan ripoff, devoid of any kind of humour or self-awareness, I'm guessing the sequel script was similarly themed. Sadly, the sequels reverted to the more straight-laced style of sword and sorcery epic, which is a shame, as the tone and comedy of this movie makes for a much more entertaining experience. Anyway, we see Rena the Seer, played by Monique Gabrielle, being thrown out of the town by the king's guard. She argues that she's not a beggar, but a prophet. But as her last prophecy saw the king's wife bearing a child, just not his, the king has commanded she be removed from the castle grounds. When she refuses and argues that she too is royalty, a princess no less, the guards begin to rough her up. But before things can go any further, Deathstalker interrupts them, demanding they stop. And when the guards challenge him with a "Do you know who we are?" his reply of "The village idiot and the two runners-up" baits them into a fight. He dispatches them quickly and non-terminally with a shovel before heading inside. Monique Gabrielle was a former Penthouse pet who, following a few small or uncredited appearances in mainstream movies including Airplane 2, Flashdance and Fear of a Black Hat, moved into erotic features and B-movies including Chained Heat, Young Lady Chatterley 2 and the title role in Emmanuelle 5. And I'm sure many of you will remember her appearance in the Penthouse Pet segment in Amazon Women on the Move. And now you can relive her glamorous glory forever, thanks to our friends at Waxpack Glam, as Real Obscure has partnered with them to bring you an exclusive virtual collectible card featuring the lovely Monique Gabrielle. And if you've heard our episode on Zombie 2, then you'll hopefully already have checked out the exclusive Video Nasty themed release from Cult Movie Cards 2. Head over to @waxpackglam.bsky.social and @cultmoviecards.bsky.social to see both. But be warned, these accounts aren't exactly what you call safe for work. Wink wink. Anyway, back to the movie. Like Terlesky, Gabrielle totally gets the assignment here, with her goofy energy being a perfect match for Deathstalker's wisecracking, and the two have great chemistry, which might be something to do with the fact that they were dating at the time. Anyway, the interior of Abbott's is exactly how you'd imagine a low-budget, low-fantasy tavern would be. An assortment of scoundrels and rogues, wenches, topless dancers, and a pig-headed warrior. I don't mean somebody who is stubborn or narrow-minded, I mean a guy with the head of a literal pig, who then proceeds to eat a roasted pig's head in a scene lifted from the original Deathstalker. Hey, if you paid for it once, why not use it twice? As Deathstalker entertains himself with a couple of ladies and an ale, Rena approaches, demanding he speak to her. He initially tries to brush her off, but when one of the guards recognises her and slaps her, Deathstalker leaps into action. We're then treated to a semi-comedic bar brawl in the classic Western style. Chairs are smashed over people's heads, Missed punches land on the wrong target, provoking a retaliation. Plates and bottles are smashed, and in one great scene, two combatants pause to watch the topless dancer, who continues her routine while the brawl ensues. It's a great bit of comedy slapstick that ends when Rena beckons to Deathstalker to leave through the back door. After a brief chase, Deathstalker and Rena arrive at her hut, and in a sequence that the hack Peter Jackson clearly stole for his Deathstalker II knockoff movies Lords of the Ring, Rena gives Deathstalker some terrible stew, which he disposes of when she's not looking. Yeah, we're on to you, Jackson. Rena, by way of apology for earlier, offers to read Deathstalker's fortune, and consulting her crystal ball, which in reality is nothing more than a crystal doorknob, she foresees a great adventure for him, that he must rescue a princess from an evil sorcerer. Are there any other kind, quips Deathstalker, and that the sorcerer is also a great swordsman, who even now is laughing at Deathstalker's swordsmanship. Goaded and enraged, Deathstalker considers the quest, asking, "And will this get me into the legends?" To which Rena replies, "Right up there with Conan." And so Deathstalker sets off with Rena to rescue the princess and defeat the evil sorcerer. Along the way they'll encounter hired henchmen, an undead horde, and a tribe of Amazon women, including a cameo from a famous gorgeous lady of wrestling, before finally facing off against the sorcerer Jarek and solving the mystery of Rena's origins. Before we get into some more notes on the production, I'm going to take a quick time out to discuss the rest of the movie's main cast. The film's sorcerer Jarek is played by John Lazar. He made his name appearing in Russ Meyer's Beyond the Valley of the Dolls and Super Vixens, and went on to appear in a number of B-movies. Although you may not necessarily recognise many of his roles or even his name, you'll certainly recognise his face, as he was very much a go-to guy for anybody looking to cast a villain in the 80s. Sultana, who is later introduced after her brief appearance in the pre-credits sequence, is played by Toni Naples. A regular member of Wynorski's acting troupe, she appeared briefly in Chopping Mall as one of the bikini promo girls, and went on to appear in a number of other movies for the director, including Transylvania Twist, Sorority House Massacre 2, Munchie and its sequel, and Dinosaur Island. Maria Sokas was an Argentinian actor who previously appeared in two of Corman's movies shot in her home country, The Warrior and the Sorceress and Wizards of the Lost Kingdom. She was also known for her appearances in telenovelas and stage work. According to Wynorski, she did struggle with the humour of the piece, having appeared in two serious sword and sorcery movies for Corman, but in the end the director had her play the role straight, and the rest of the cast play accordingly to that. And appearing as Gorgo is the wrestling legend Dee Boer, more popularly known as Matilda the Hun of Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling fame. As well as competing in the ring, she also helped recruit and train the other Gorgeous Ladies, and even wrote the show's theme tune. Now, working in Argentina wasn't without its problems. For starters, the movie's producer was unhappy with the rewrites Wynorski did to the original script and the tonal changes from the straight Conan copy to satirical comedy. However, when Corman visited the set and saw the dailies, he gave Wynorski his approval to continue down this route. As this was the last of the fantasy movies being made there, and the sets were being reused, Wynorski found many of them to be in a poor state of repair, and, well, if you look closely, you can see they're not particularly impressive. Which would be an issue if this were a serious movie, but honestly their crappiness kind of adds to the movie's comedy charm. Although she cites this as one of her favourite jobs, Monique Gabrielle recalls that there were a number of issues with the shoot when it came to stunt work and safety. John Terlesky, John Lazar and Toni Naples all did their own sword fighting in the combat sequences, and at one point Gabrielle was almost dropped from a height into a pot of, thankfully fake, boiling water. Interestingly, Terlesky performed all his own stunts during the wrestling match with Matilda the Hun. Like I say, why this guy wasn't a bigger action star is beyond me. Anyway, let's get back to the plot as we enter the spoiler zone. We discover that Rena is in fact Princess Evie of the Kingdom of Zafar. Zephyr, I have no idea how this is pronounced, and apparently nobody else in the movie does, but the evil Jarek rules through the use of a magical copy he has made of the princess. But the cloning process is not perfect, and the fake Evie must feed regularly on the energies of others. It gives Monique Gabrielle a great opportunity to play two roles, with her naive, bubbly Rena being the opposite of the manipulative, bratty Evie. The double identity concept was actually the choice of Wynorski, who wrote the dual role due to the lack of native English speakers on the cast. Anyway, Deathstalker and Rena encounter a variety of perils on their route to the palace, including an undead horde that is straight out of a Fulci movie, and a village of Amazon women who think Rena is the evil Evie. Through trial by combat, Deathstalker is able to prove her innocence, but when Rena sees Deathstalker dallying with the Amazon Queen, she runs away in a fit of jealousy. Deathstalker is able to rescue Rena from Sultana after narrowly escaping marriage to the Amazon Queen, and after defeating her in combat, the two continue on their way. Sultana, meanwhile, is resurrected magically by Jarek, and then the two make love. Tony Naples wasn't comfortable being nude and so didn't strip for the scene. When Corman saw the sequence, he asked where the nudity was, so Wynorski went back and shot additional topless scenes with a body double and inserted them. However, when Naples saw the finished footage, she expressed her disappointment, not at Wynorski inserting the footage, but because she thought she had better breasts than the body double. And from that point she did all her own nude work. Anyway, Deathstalker is eventually captured as they attempt to enter the tunnels below the palace, and in a little nod to both Poe and James Bond, he's placed under a swinging pendulum. When he asks Sultana if she expects him to talk, she replies, "No, I expect you to die." Referential comedy, I love it. Rena, meanwhile, is attacked by the palace guards, but before they can thankfully do much more than tear her top off, she is rescued by the Amazons. Deathstalker is released from the torture device and taken to the chambers of the Evie clone, who then seduces him. In the middle of their tryst, Evie is struck on the head from behind by Rena, who scolds Deathstalker for hanging round with girls like that. Reunited, the pair make to leave, but run into Jarek and Sultana, along with a legion of his men. However, the Amazons arrive to even up the numbers and, in a surprisingly good battle sequence for a low-budget Conan parody, they engage in a protracted battle, featuring some great stunts and swordplay. Jarek and Evie flee the battle and Rena and Deathstalker give chase. Deathstalker and the Sorcerer battle, and Deathstalker emerges triumphant. Meanwhile, Rena is able to defeat Evie, thus reclaiming her throne. The movie ends with Rena restored to her rightful place as Princess Evie, and at her coronation, she calls Deathstalker to her. He asks if they will be remembered as legends, to which she says they will, and 1,000 years from now, players will reenact their deeds. "Well, I sure hope they get a good-looking guy to play me," replies Deathstalker, with a huge knowing grin. The two kiss, and the movie ends. Well, almost. Because as the end credits roll, we're treated to a number of outtakes from the movie, including a number of shots of topless women, because as Wynorski himself put it, "My audience love naked women," along with some genuinely funny moments that didn't make it into the final edit, including one of a bemused extra wandering around the movie's climactic battle, just looking for somebody to fight. Now, the 80s saw an absolute deluge of fantasy movies, most trading on the success of Conan the Barbarian, and the Italian movie industry was particularly guilty of cashing in on this. Indeed, it seemed back then Italians only made 3 kinds of movies: more Zombie 3s, bad Conan rip-offs, and bad Mad Max rip-offs. but Deathstalker II is an absolute joy to watch. It's like Sam Raimi directed The Princess Bride with a dose of smut thrown in for good measure. It never takes itself seriously, it's full of jokes, which, even if they don't land, doesn't matter because the cast are having so much fun with it. And some surprisingly good swordplay and stunt work on top of all of this. Honestly, if somebody said to me, pick your top 80s fantasy movies, this would be right up there. This might be heretical, but it's more entertaining than Conan the Barbarian, and tonally it's way more even than The Beastmaster. That's not to say it's technically a better movie than either of them, but in terms of pure, unadulterated fun, you just can't beat this one. It's brisk, it never sags, insert your own boob joke there, and at 86 minutes it doesn't overstay its welcome. And the thing is, 80s fantasy movies always looked cheap. No matter the budget or the production design or all of that other stuff, there's always a fakeness to them because of the amount of world building it takes to make them look real. Even the mighty Conan the Barbarian is still just a bunch of people in a desert, which, if we're all being honest here, is a bit of a cop-out. But Deathstalker 2 doesn't care. It revels in its cheapness and knows it's another bad 80s fantasy movie. However, instead of trying to make it a living, realised world, they play it for what it is, a comedy that breaks the fourth wall, features a hackneyed fantasy plot, and makes dozens of anachronistic gags to play for the laughs. And it does it well. As I say, the cast are great. They're clearly enjoying every minute of it, and their energy and joy radiates from the screen. Their comedic timing, particularly from Terlesky and Gabrielle, is great. They know it's cheese, and these are at times cringe-inducing gags, but they play it perfectly. If you're a fan of the knowing comedy of The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., then you'll immediately see what they're doing here. It sits somewhere between that show and a pantomime, with a plot that's been recycled from hundreds of sources and incorporates every fantasy cliché you can think of and absolutely revels in it. In fact, the movie is so smart that it even presents itself as a meta-comedy, with a knowing wink to the audience that the cast know you're watching a movie, and the closing of the throne room doors even mirroring the closing of stage curtains. It's totally self-aware, smart, and genuinely entertaining. And on top of that, it's got a bunch of boobs in it. What more could you ask for? And on that note, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Real Obscure. This episode of Real Obscure was written, produced and slathered in baby oil by me, Kevin H. Shaw. If you enjoyed this episode, then please consider liking, sharing and subscribing. You can also comment to tell me what you thought of it, and you can email your thoughts to hellorealobscure@gmail.com. If you'd like to help support us financially and you're on YouTube, you can use the thank option to make a one-time donation. And to learn more about the podcast, please visit realobscurepod.com, and don't forget I'm also on Blue Sky using the handle @realobscurepod. Deathstalker II is copyright 1987. All content here is used for educational and commentary purposes under Section 107 of the Copyright Act, fair use, and remains the property of the respective copyright holders. Presented here for the purposes of critique, commentary and discussion. No copyright infringement is intended, so please don't sue me or make me watch the first Deathstalker movie again.